This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. Francine Pickup is a strategic planning advisor at the Regional Bureau for Asia Pacific for the United Nations Development Program. She has 15 years of experience across the globe in humanitarian and development work with a variety of UN agencies and non-governmental organizations such as Amnesty International and Oxfam. She holds a Ph.D. and Master's in Development Studies from the London School of Economics and a BA in Social Anthropology from Cambridge University. I spoke with her from her office in New York. Hi there, Francine. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on Terms of Reference today up in the snowy cold of New York. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
So let's start off. Can you tell us what is it that you do right now for UNDP as the Strategic Planning Advisor for the Asia Pacific region? What does that entail?
So I've been in this position for a year and a half now. Strategic Planning Advisor in Asia Pacific for UNDP. This basically involves identifying and outlining the strategic direction of UNDP in Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific is a huge region for us, going, right from Afghanistan through to China, India, through to East Asia, Thailand, right through to the Pacific, Tonga, Tuvalu, and these other countries. So it's a huge, diverse region. And what I do in my job is to identify what are the priorities from a development perspective for us in the region, and how are we going to, and what exactly are we going to do in terms of implementing those priorities? So how does that translate into action on the ground in the countries that we work? So it's strategic direction and work planning. And then the other part of the job is monitoring and reporting on results. So monitoring our performance and whether we are achieving the results that we set out to achieve, whether we need to change course because something's not working well, and then reporting on those results at the end of the year, showing how UNDP in the last five years has spent almost $6 billion in the region. So what do we have to show for the money that we spent? What results did we achieve? How did we make people's lives better? So those are the main aspects of my work. And then, sorry, Stephen, the final thing is UNDP is going through is just developing its new strategic plan for the next 4 years. So it's rolling out the new strategic plan within our region. That's the third aspect of what I do.
So are you overseeing that $6 billion budget, or how do you fit into that as far as, when you're saying you help with the planning, are you overseeing staff, or do you control offices, or what does that look like?
Yeah, no, I control nothing. Yeah, no, I'm an advisor. In contrast to previous positions, I don't manage anyone or anything. I am an advisor. So in that sense, I am advising the director here and the deputy director on the direction and the results and so on. And I'm supporting the country offices and the regional centre that we have in Bangkok in terms of how to take forward those priorities, how to prioritise things in their work plan, and how to boost their capacity to monitor and report on results. I'm not specifically responsible for performance and overseeing that money. I'm playing an advisory role.
So can you maybe take me through what a typical day might look like? Is it mostly meetings? Is it lots of phone calls? Are you working on spreadsheets? What does it look like?
So a typical day. Well, the good thing is that I arrive at the office always excited. I enjoy my job. I find it rewarding. So I sort of get here with my desk is covered in papers. Work plans and results reports and other such things. So it's always very hectic. There's never enough time in the day. I think that because we have Asia Pacific is 12 hours away generally, the first thing I do is have any phone calls within the region. So follow up with country offices on any issues, follow up with the regional centre, who is the technical arm of what we do. So the morning is often with phone calls to the regional centre and country offices. And then I would say a good portion of my time is, coordinating on work planning with colleagues within the Asia Pacific Bureau, but also with the technical bureaus here. A lot of what I do is coordination still. It's lobbying, it's getting people to engage in initiatives with you, get their buy-in for things. So a good amount of time is that. And then whenever possible, I also try to shut myself away and do analysis. I think that one of the areas where we really need to develop our work and where there's lots of scope for improvement is on the analytical side. So for my job, that means looking at what's going on in all our country offices and saying, well, where are we performing well and where are we performing not so well? How do we lift those areas where we're not performing well? And what can we learn from the areas that are performing well? So it's that kind of big picture regional analysis, reviewing all the data, reviewing all the information that's swimming around and analyzing it and coming out with some, direction and some ways forward from it. So, that's also a big part of my day.
Sitting in New York, do you feel disconnected from the region? You said, you start up and there's already some time zone issues as soon as you get to work. Is that an issue, or do you spend a lot of time traveling there?
I travel a little bit. I probably travel to the region maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Not so much because there are cost constraints on a lot of travel. So I only go for really important things. I traveled to Vietnam a couple of months ago, and I'll be going to Afghanistan in the coming months to support them in the development of their new country program for the next 4 years. But yeah, the time difference is a big challenge. It does mean that I end up having a lot of meetings very late at night once I've put the kids to bed. So that's quite normal practice to have these Skype conversations at 10 or 11 p.m., which is when a big part of Asia Pacific is waking up. So yes, that is a challenge, and it would be easier. I mean, we are going through this through this restructuring process right now in UNDP, and some of our posts will be moved to the regional centre, specifically so that we can be closer to the field. But some posts will stay here simply because it's important to have a corporate analysis and corporate planning capacity as well.
So you just said, just to reconfirm, that's fairly typical maybe of people in your department or in your regional capacity there at the corporate office, that work's happening at night or maybe very early in the morning, and that's just sort of an accepted work practice.
Yes, it is normal practice to be working, late at night because of the time differences, and because you're working, with the other side of the world, and you have a tight deadline. You have to get feedback overnight often, so it's unavoidable, and everybody accepts it and works with it.
Tell me about, you had mentioned you're taking us through your day, you mentioned there's a lot of coordination, but then you also specifically use the word lobbying. What does that entail? Is that lobbying with sort of country directors or program directors, or are you talking about host governments or?
Oh no, I mean the lobbying with host governments is something that takes place, primarily within country offices, or it could be by the country divisions here who liaise with the political missions. But for me, no, I was primarily referring to lobbying with colleagues within UNDP. I mean, I think it's, UNDP has lots of different departments, and it's important to get people on board and to create ownership and to bring as many different players from across UNDP who have different things to add, different contributions to make, to get them all on board. And this is my approach, coming from coordination into agency work. It's the same within a big organization also. You need to get widespread backing for what you're doing. So a lot of what is involved is, I called it lobbying, but it's just, talking to people and getting their inputs into your plans.
Okay. So it's that participatory aspect of these programs.
Yeah.
Tell me about what are some of the programs you're most excited about across the Pacific Asia region?
I think I focus a lot. There's the what of what we do, right? Which is the substantive programs. So the things that excite me most, are in terms of the what. Is the advances or the work that we're doing on gender. Gender. The region Asia Pacific has some of the highest gender inequality in the world, and we are trying to make headway on issues such as gender-based violence, and seem to be gaining some traction in that area. Then other what is the disaster risk reduction. This is a critical issue, disasters in Asia Pacific, and then looking at the influence of climate change on disasters, but also widening to look at conflict and disasters and how to better predict and be prepared for any kind of disaster or crisis. I think that's an area that's gained a lot of momentum within our region. And then the issue of livelihoods. Livelihoods is an old concept, but we're really, I think, in UNDP, we're putting renewed focus on the issue of poverty and inequality, and it's extremely challenging to show what impact one is having on poverty and inequality. They are such, big things in countries, and to be able to show as an organization what your contribution is to reducing poverty and inequality is an extraordinary challenge. To show how your specific interventions are reducing poverty or inequality is extraordinarily difficult, but this is now what the donors are asking of us. So one of the things that I get particularly excited about is our work on, how to improve our results-based management, our RBM, improve the way we monitor projects, because there's a lot of scope for improving monitoring and reporting. Often, monitoring is understood as, filing in back to office kind of report, or filling in a sort of report when you've visited a project. But there are many new innovative ways out there of monitoring project level, but also monitoring, change in the situation. I'm thinking of, new technologies using SMS to monitor and so on. And these are particularly exciting in some of the countries where we have poor access, for example, Afghanistan or Pakistan, or countries that have, are very remote and difficult to get to. So, for example, in the Pacific Islands, it's very difficult for us to reach some of these areas. Or, in countries like Nepal, where there are, it's very difficult to get to some of the places where we have projects. So that whole area of how to improve the way we plan for results and monitor results and collect information and analyze information is very interesting to me. And then another area, again, more about the how than the what, is this whole, I don't know if you've heard about it, this idea of scaling up. I think, in UNDP, one of our priorities, especially in our bureau in Asia Pacific, is to really try and increase the impact of our interventions by not doing, small, piecemeal, scattered projects that don't necessarily go anywhere. They have impact on a small number of people, for sure, but they don't really have bigger impact. And so another thing that I find particularly sort of exciting is trying to promote scaling up. So really from the outset of the design of a project, looking at what is the scale that you want this initiative to get to. Is it that, a small grassroots sort of initiative, in the end you want it to influence policy change and therefore reach a far larger number of people. So the idea of improving the quality and sustainability of our work by scaling up. So this is another area that I think is important.
Have you? Let me talk to you. There's a bunch of great stuff that you just talked about. I'd like to unpack a little more. Is there a particular example of scaling up that you have off the top of your head where UNDP has had a success and you're now looking to duplicate and scale that?
We've actually created this scaling up fund where we're strategically, instead of just giving all our country officers a bit of this money, we have UNDP is structured in a way whereby we have like a small amount of core resources and which we get from UNDP, and for the rest, which is about 85%, we go and mobilize donors for that, bilaterally and so on. But we have a little bit of core money, and we're trying to use that strategically. And so one of the things we did to try and use that money strategically was to establish a scale-up fund. And this fund, we used it to fund projects that had succeeded and demonstrated results on a small scale and who showed that they could, that they saw a pathway for scaling that up and achieving bigger impact. So off the top of my head, the one that I like is called Green Bricks. It's set in Bangladesh. It's about creating environmentally friendly, I'm not getting all the technical language right, but basically it's about creating environmentally friendly ways of creating bricks, building bricks that reduce energy costs for small and medium-sized enterprises, industries, brick producers basically, informal sector, small-scale brick producers. It's introducing technology so that the energy costs go down, which gives them more profits, and it's also good for the environment. And so we're funding them to scale up that initiative through the private sector by working with basically a network of brick makers and getting funding from bigger private sector organizations, as well as getting some government cost sharing for the initiative to scale that up so it affects it affects a much larger number of brick makers across the country, and thereby has a sort of tangible impact on CO2 emissions and increasing and reducing poverty levels.
Are there levers, are there particular techniques, or, for instance, with this Green Brick program, is there a way that UNDP or your office would specifically use to say, hey, look, we started this initiative and we can say that we had an impact on poverty in Bangladesh to this degree? Is there a particular technique that you use for that, or is this still a struggle on each project in each country?
I think that it's a very important question that you raise. There are so many things to say, I don't even know where to start. But, in terms of attribution, we would never, I don't think, where we're at now, UNDP would not say that, we would not attribute the reduction in poverty to our initiatives. I think we talk about contribution rather than attribution. And so here it is important to be very clear and to be thorough about showing how our initiatives contributed to certain outputs. So, and then we want to show that our outputs contributed to a broader outcome level change. The outcome level change is really beyond our control, particularly in such a huge region where there are so many other more important economic factors that shape poverty. And, poverty has fallen dramatically in Asia Pacific, and that was not so much to do with, aid as it was to do with economic growth and market behavior. So it's very difficult to be able to draw that direct link, and very difficult to say that we actually caused something to happen. I think that we need to be much clearer at showing how we contributed to output level change, and then showing how that output level change, also contributed to outcome level change. I think we're going a step in the right direction. We are, I had to write a 5-year results report last year, and it was very challenging because we have, we work in 36 different countries, and we have 24 country offices, and they're all collecting information on what they're doing. But I wanted to be able to say, as a bureau within the region, we have contributed to the reduction of CO2 emissions by so much. Now, CO2 emissions is one area where it is relatively easy to count. You can count the amount of energy saved, which you can convert into CO2 emissions, but you can count that, and therefore you can show your regional impact, especially because in our work on the environment, we're all monitoring the same indicators. In other areas, such as poverty or such as governance, we are now, but in the past we haven't been using standardized indicators across our countries, so it's very difficult to report on regional level change. At a country level, I think it's possible. We can say in China we did this and it contributed to this, but to say at a regional level in Asia Pacific, this money that we spent led to this result in aggregate is a very challenging thing to do. But I think with the new strategic plan that we're now rolling out for 2014, we will have standardized indicators that we will all use for all our countries, and hopefully we will be better placed to show our contribution. But going back to your original question, to show by how much we reduced poverty, which is something that the donors and the member states are asking us to do, is a very difficult task. And yes, I think that there is no clear answer to me, at least.
Sure.
I want you to do that.
You're clearly passionate about the work you do. It's fantastic to hear you say you get into work in the morning and you're energized. Tell us how what was your decision way back when to join in, to become a part of this humanitarian aid and international development community? I think this has been your entire career. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have. I've done it since I began. I think from in my teens, like from when I was 15 or so, I had this burning passion to promote justice, particularly from a gender perspective. I wanted to address power relations. I wanted a fairer world. And I wanted to understand other cultures better. I felt that more needed to be done to bridge other cultures, to form bridges between cultures and to understand each other better. I felt that culture was very important, and a lot of misunderstandings happened because of culture. So I went into anthropology, and I still to this day think that was a discipline that really shaped my outlook on things. I also had this burning passion, or need to travel and to see the world. So I didn't think about humanitarian at the time, but the development field was something that it seemed the obvious choice. So I never really had much doubt. It was always very clear to me which direction I was going in. So I was fortunate in that sense. And then, I didn't really think about humanitarian work. I was more into development work, and I did a master's and Ph.D. on development. And then I was applying for jobs. I did my Ph.D. on Russia back in the late 1990s, and thought, thinking at the time that, former Soviet Union was a fascinating place to work because, it was basically being turned on its head with the collapse of the Soviet Union, introduction of the market. So I did my Ph.D. on Russia and started applying for jobs in Chechnya and other places because that's where a lot of the jobs were. And
because everybody thinks yes, Chechnya, that's where I want to go work.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, I was interviewed by Oxfam for a job in Chechnya, and they said, you didn't get that job, but we're interested in using you in Jerusalem. So I thought, oh my goodness, I know nothing about the Middle East. I know all about Eastern Europe, but nothing about the Middle East. But I wanted a job. I have this sort of urge to move, and I said, okay, I'll take it, and ended up in Jerusalem with Oxfam, working on livelihoods. And so it was a fantastic first, proper job, really. Basically was, it was a policy advisor on livelihoods, and so I was very fortunate to spend a lot of my time doing interviews with, households roaming around the West Bank, during the early days of the closures and the Intifada, and finding out from households what it was that, how their livelihoods had been affected by the conflict, and seeing how, what are the best policy initiatives to, alleviate their suffering. So it was a good first position, but it kind of reoriented me towards sort of more, I ended up in humanitarian settings as a result of that for several years, but very protracted, conflict-ridden settings. So the issues weren't, purely humanitarian. They were often sort of longer-term development issues in conflict settings that I was dealing with.
And so, take us, fast forward a little bit. I find it interesting that your first job was an advisor as well.
Mm.
Have you hopped from advisory to advisory as you get to be strategic planning advisor for Asia Pacific, or what are the stepping stones there to end up in New York?
I think my background is really research and analysis.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's with the studying that I did, I have a strong background in research methodologies and analysis. And so I think that's been one of my sort of attributes, if you like. One of the things that I bring to my job is this sort of inquiry, curiosity, wish to analyze, which lends itself very well to advisory style positions. And so, whether it be in my job in OCHA in occupied Palestinian territory, or then later, the job in Iraq when I set up this interagency information analysis unit, it was really the idea was to make our work more evidence-based, right? To make the UN or whoever it is make decision-making more evidence-based. Now, sometimes I've had the opportunity to create a team to do that. In Iraq and in Palestine, I created a team. We had the resources because they were very political conflicts. There was money, and we were able to create teams to do that. In other contexts, like currently now, it's I'm playing more of an advisory role. But even in my current position, I think there is a recognition of the need to allocate more capacity, more resources to strategic planning, because analysis feeds into strategic planning, right? You plan based on your analysis. So to me, those two roles are quite linked.
You say that as if it's obvious. Have you, and obviously to someone such as yourself, that that is obviously, you analyze and at the very beginning, you look at your baseline and then you plan and design from there. Why do you think that there still continues to be a fairly large dearth of that type of analysis and planning and then design from planning that goes on in aid and development? Is it just capacity? Is it just donors are willing to accept it, or?
Yeah, I think it's just that we're very reactive, and donors don't ask it of us sufficiently. They also donors also act in a reactive way according to political incentives, right? Political interests.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are still challenged. We're still challenged to really allocate resources to where the needs are the greatest. The greatest funds, biggest amounts of money are still going to those very politicized countries or countries where donors have political interests.
So to bring that to your region, Afghanistan is still by and far the large cow, and Myanmar and Laos, well, actually probably Myanmar now is probably getting a big uptick. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So Afghanistan is by far the biggest country in terms of delivery, and then followed by, Pakistan and Bangladesh, and as you say, Indonesia is another one, followed by countries such as Myanmar, which, yes, are receiving a lot of attention now because of the transition. But again, donor funding is going down in general. Mm-hmm. And therefore, there is much more of a emphasis by donors on results mm-hmm. and accountability and transparency and evidence. So I think that there is going, already I'm seeing much, that there's a recognition, and it won't be in only UNDP, it will be across the board, I'm sure. A need for much more sort of rigorous results-based reporting, stronger RBM, better evidence gathering, better use of information, monitoring. I'm sure that this is an area that is going to grow. It has to, not only because the donors are demanding it because resources are dwindling, but also because our government partners, increasingly our partners, including the people who are providing us money, are the governments that, of the countries where we're working. Mm-hmm. So especially given in our region, it's, a lot of our countries are becoming middle-income countries now, no longer, LDCs or lower-income countries. And that really challenges us to tailor and adapt the work that we do. So instead of implementing projects on the ground, there is a far greater emphasis on policy advisory support, right? The countries are now requesting, very specialized technical support to address specific problems that they have, and they want to use the experience from other countries where these things have worked. So it's very specialized technical products and services that we should be offering, together with, this convening role, creating partnerships, putting countries in touch with each other so that they can share their experiences. So we're no longer the ones imparting, knowledge and expertise, and countries can actually feed off and benefit from each other. And this is a big priority for our member states as well.
You've spent your entire career inside the United Nations in some capacity in different agencies. What has been your biggest sort of frustration working inside that type of large bureaucracy?
Well, I haven't worked my entire life in the UN.
I stand corrected. Sorry.
No, I started out in the NGO world and worked with Amnesty for several years in London, and then with Oxfam in Oxford, and then Oxfam in occupied Palestinian territory. So, and that was a very good foundation. I think it's an important foundation, an experience that I value. I wouldn't have wanted to go directly into the UN. I appreciate that NGO experience, that grassroots kind of experience. The biggest challenge of working in the UN, let me rephrase that question positively. The good thing about working in the UN is that it is a big bureaucracy, of course, but the thing that surprised me pleasantly is that it is actually very possible to influence change. If you have good ideas, senior managers can be very high-level people, and they will listen, and they will, implement ideas that you have. So, contrary to the belief that it's a bureaucracy, but no, it's really possible to influence change if you have good ideas. So, that's really why I'm here. If I didn't think I could influence change, then I would work for some other kind of organization. But your voice can be heard and changes can be made, even though it's a very big bureaucracy. I guess, the downside is, politics. I don't necessarily want to go into it.
Sure. I understand. Mm-hmm.
But, some parts of the organization are resistant to change.
When you say politics, let me just unpack it this way. Are you talking internal politics or external pressure from your donor governments and that kind of thing?
No, I'm more talking about the internal politics.
Mm.
The way the organization organizes itself.
But don't you think that might be commiserate with any large organization? I mean, any large corporation, etc.?
I don't know. I haven't been in the private sector. I don't know if they are more efficient than we are. Mm-hmm. But yeah, sure, there are areas where there's a bit of duplication, where, there's
turf wars, power struggles, these kinds.
Those kinds of things exist, but you can avoid them as much as you can, and just get on with producing outputs and results, and then those will be recognized and they're often taken on board. Okay,
so the last question. What advice would you give to someone either who is considering, coming into a career in aid or development, or someone who is, coming up the chain in UNDP, about how to be successful, about how to not only enjoy the work that they're doing, but feel like they have that voice?
I think that it's important to get experience in the field. I think country office or, experience working in various countries is extremely important. I wouldn't underestimate the importance of that. I certainly, the last thing I would do is start off my career in a UN agency in headquarters. I think I would encourage people to get field experience as much as possible. I think also, I would personally, I think there are a few skills that are really important. I mean, being able to write well is a really important skill. And I do think that analysis and being comfortable dealing with, both qualitative and quantitative data is also a very, very valuable skill, especially today. So I would, without wanting to put pressure, I would say, definitely do a master's, and if you can, and you're interested in research, do a Ph.D, because this gives you really solid foundations for taking your work forward. I think those are the things. Perhaps, just the other, just to finish, Stephen, I think, a lot of people say, oh, but, if you go into a career in humanitarian or development work, it's extremely difficult to have a marriage or a relationship, and people can be put off by that. But I think that it's totally possible, especially these days where, as a consultant, one can work from different locations. There are, as many happy couples and families out there. So it's not something that means that you have to sacrifice in other areas such as your family.
Thank you so much for your time today, Francine.
No problem. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
You've been listening to Terms of Reference, a weekly podcast from aidpreneur.com. Find us on iTunes or at www.aidpreneur.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.